Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Nazir daf Kaf Bet. I'm gonna well, first let me share my screen. I'm going to cover something I had asked Dove yesterday, whether he dealt with the Tosos at the end of Kaf Aleph on the bet. He said that he had not, and I thought it was just such a nice Tosos that sort of asks what I thought was a pretty clear question, and so I thought I'd begin with it. But let's talk about where we are in the Gemara. So right now, we're trying to answer the following question. When a husband revokes his wife's vow, is he effectively uprooting it so that it is if the vow never existed, meaning the revocation of the vow is retroactive? Or is he simply cutting it off from this point forward? Now, I will note that when we study this precise issue, which of course is very relevant in Maseches Nedarim, because what Nedarim is a lot about, and indeed the whole reason that it's brought in Seder Nashim about women is because of this particular concept. And we dealt with it there, and we noted in that situation that we poskin that in fact it is not retroactive, it is just cutting it off. And so we'll see a little bit more of that later today. But in any event, we tried 3 different times to answer this question yesterday, and in each of the 3 times, the answer was rejected. Today, we're going to have 2 successful attempts, but they'll go in different directions. And so we'll see in a Tosfos how it's not the large Tosfos, so you don't have to worry about that. That will get to on the bet, because that actually goes to Kapet bet, but we won't go through it in detail because I think that the Ron has a nice answer for the question, one of the questions that Tosfos is dealing with there. But in any event, the point is that we are trying to answer the question of whether the revocation that a husband does for his wife, and similarly the father would do for his daughter, is it from this point forward a revocation so that there's no violation going forward, or is it even retroactive? And so that's the debate or the question that we're facing, and we're trying to answer it. Now, before we get to that 4th effort to answer the question, I want to go back and tell you what the 3rd answer was, and note a Tosfos on this, because this daf has relatively little Gemara, as you'll see, and so I thought we would learn an extra Tosfos by going back to a little bit of yesterday. So in yesterday's, we cited a Mishnah, the Mishnah that we're going to start with tomorrow, where the Mishnah says, if a wife became a Nazir and intentionally drank wine and became tamei, she's going to receive 40 lashes. So the Gemara says, hey, there's no big chiddush there. If you tell me in any sin that if somebody does a sin intentionally, they're going to get lashes. So what's the big surprise? Why did the Mishnah need to tell us that? So so as a result, since there's no chiddush, if we're just talking about the women without any kind of effort to revoke the vow, so as a result, let's say that this is really teaching that the husband has revoked the vow after her violation, and the Mishnah is telling us that the revocation is not retroactive, and that's why she gets 40 lashes. So the Gemara answered, no, it's not. They rejected this approach and saying that no, really there could be no chiddush in the beginning of the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is really consistent with the revocation being retroactive. And the chiddush in the Mishnah is that if the husband revokes and then the wife violates, because this is what the end of the Mishnah says, the Mishnah that's on Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph, the end of that Mishnah says that if the husband revokes the vow and then the wife, good to see you, Mark and Lori, and then the wife comes in and goes ahead and does the violation. So again, the revocation is before the violation, but the wife didn't know about it, right? The wife didn't know that the revocation had happened. So she thinks she's violating something, but in fact, she's not. So in that situation, she's not going to get lashes. That's what the Tanna Kama said.
What happened, David?
So here's the story.
Yeah, but somebody's missing.
Oh, I don't know. Sam maybe he isn't available today. So anyway, so we have and we're missing a table too, so that's okay. So Tosfos asked the following question. I don't understand. And you know what? Let's take a look. We'll look at the Tosfos inside. So this is the Tosfos at Kaf Amud. Moshe is with us on the computer. So the question is, we'll start with the second to last line of Tosfos, which begins V'im Tomar, my irya hefer la va'achar kach haisa shosa. Why is it that in the end of the Mishnah, the Mishnah is talking about a situation where the husband revokes and then the wife drinks, because and that's a situation where she doesn't get lashes. If we're saying that the revocation is retroactive, well, then even if the wife drinks and then the husband revokes, she won't get lashes, and that's a much bigger chiddush. So why not tell us that she drank or she became tameh, and then the husband hefer la, and the husband revoked it? De'ena sofeges, that she doesn't get lashes. Kevan de meikar akar, because we're saying, according to this view, that Mishnah is according to the one that says that the revocation is retroactive. So the Tosfos answers, so you understand the question. The question is, we were trying to say that Mishnah showed that it's actually a cutting off from this point forward because there's no big chiddush in the Reisha. We said, all right, so the chiddush isn't in the Reisha of that Mishnah, the chiddush is in the Seifa of that Mishnah. But the chiddush that they teach us in the Seifa of that Mishnah is not the biggest chiddush they could make. A much bigger chiddush, if you're saying that it's retroactive, would be that to say that the woman did the violation and then the husband revoked and she still doesn't get lashes. So why is it that we don't teach that? So we have a good question, because if in fact that were true, why we should teach that? So maybe again you could say that that show that really that Mishnah should be viewed as consistent with cutting things off and not with being retroactive. So v'yesh lomer to mishum Rabbi Yehuda nakat hachi, that it's because of Rabbi Yehuda. So we in that Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says that in the situation where the Tanakama says that she does not get lashes, Rabbi Yehuda says she does get lashes. She gets lashes midirabanan. And so the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda is actually greater in this case, because what does Rabbi Yehuda say? Rabbi Yehuda says that, of course, if she were to do the violation and then have the husband revoke, well, when she did the violation, she was right that she was prohibited to do it. So, of course, even if you were to say that the revocation is retroactive, it makes a lot of sense to say that she should be punished and get the lashes midirabanan. But by saying that we're talking about a case where the husband does the revocation and only then does the wife do the violation, well, then in that case, that's a bigger chiddush according to Rabbi Yehuda. That even in that case, even when the truth is that because it's already been revoked, she's definitely not doing anything wrong. But just her thinking about doing something wrong is sufficient for the rabbinic lashes to apply. So mishum Rabbi Yehuda nakat hachi, again, because of Rabbi Yehuda, we say this: afilu behefer va'achar kach shasasa, that in a situation where the husband revoked and then she drank the wine, so feges makas mardus, she gets the lashes of rebellion. Of afal gaf the kvar hefer, even though the husband had already revoked the vow, because her intention was to violate. So I thought that was an interesting Tosfos and worth learning before we got started. So now we're going to pick up with the top of Kaf Bet Amud Aleph, and at the top line in the middle of the line as we are giving the fourth and the fifth answers. And again, these answers will actually contradict. So Tashma, let's take a look and see whether we can prove that revocation is retroactive or from this point forward, based on the following brisa. Ha'isha shenadra b'nazir v'nitmei. You have a woman who became a nazir and then she became tamei. V'achar kach hefer labala, and then her husband revoked the vow. Mivia chatas ha'of. She brings a bird chatas. She brings a sin offering. Ve'ena mivia ola ha'of. But she does not bring the ola. She does not bring the second pair of that bird offerings, because of the isalka daidak bal megas gaias. And now, if you say that in fact she should that the husband's revocation only comes from this point forward, so taisi nami ola, so she should also bring the ola. And so Tosos here in the top, Tosos points out v'hu adin da asham. It again picking up Haki Garcina, guys at Taisi Olas Haof. Why not have the Olas Haof as well? Meaning, if in fact she violated it, the biblical prohibition, well then she should have to bring the Ola of the bird Ola, the bird offering that is fully burnt to God as well. And Tosos points out v'hu adin da asham, and the same rule applies to the asham offering. That's the atonement offering. So Nami as well. Ibaile, we could have asked that. Ibaile la suya, we could have asked that question. Ela nakat olas hope, but the Gemara chose to specifically focus on the bird ola, mishum dechatas haof, va'olas haof b'chad kruksivi, because both of those are written in a single verse, and so that's why they're talking about. But actually, it's interesting. What's interesting about this, and the reason that I specifically wanted to quote this, is that the Mefarish, over where Rashi is written in the last of the wide lines of at the top, Rashi says the following: Nasi, or the Mefarish says the following: Nasi nami olas haof. Right? We should have also said olas haof. Ume asham lo parach. We did not ask about the asham on purpose. The taisi nami asham. The ain asham, that he should have brought an asham. We don't ask that question because the ain asham ba el b'makom shetzarach likanes b'naziras acheres. That according to the Mefarish, the only time one who is tamei needs to bring an asham is if they are going to re-enter their nazirut. But in this situation, because the husband has revoked the vow, there's no need, and so as a result, there is no question about why she doesn't need to bring the asham. The question is only about if, in fact, you're saying that things are only cut off from this point forward. Well, then why doesn't she also bring the ola? So kihechi deticho alav nazirus b'tahara. So if that just as if he were to eliminate her nazirus in a situation where she was tahor, she would not bring an asham. So too here, she would not bring an asham. So ve'elamai, but then you're probably already thinking this question. So what are you going to say? Mi akar, that in fact the husband uprooted the whole nazirut altogether. Why does she have to bring the sin offering? Meaning, if in fact she didn't violate anything because it's as if she never made the vow in the first place, why is she bringing any kind of sin offering? So the Gemara answers, Hachinami, no, you're right. She's not bringing a sin offering because she in some way violated her Nazirut. Vahamani, and who is the author of this brisa? Rabbi Elazar HaKapar. It's Rabbi Elazar HaKapar. Did Tanya, because we learned, what did Rabbi Elazar HaKapar say? He said the following: Rabbi Elazar HaKapar, Beribi Amar, Ma Talmud Lomar Me'ashar Chata Al Hanefesh. That why does the Torah say when it comes to the sin of a person becoming tamei while being a nazir? Why is that? Why is that referred to as having sinned against the soul? Against which soul did the person who's a nazir sin? It's because the nazir said that they weren't going to drink wine. And we don't believe in self-deprivation in Judaism. We believe in moderation. So nikra chote. So as a result, he's called a sinner. V'halo dvarim kal v'chomer. And not only that, but we could say that there's a kal v'chomer umazeh shalot tziyar atzmo element yayin nikra chote, that somebody who deprives themselves only from wine is called a sinner. Hamitzar al tzmo al mikol davar al achas kama v'kama. So then, if you deprive yourself from everything, if you fast unnecessarily, well, then certainly you would be a sinner. So it's a result. You should not you should fast when you're supposed to fast, but you're not supposed to fast when you're not supposed to fast. So the question, and so as a result, what do we see from this? We see that according to Rebbe Lazar HaKapar, the Nazirut is actually eliminated retroactively. And the only reason she brings a sin offering is because she deprived herself of wine. So what do we see from this? We see that in this answer, we are saying that the revocation is mi'akar akar, that we are undoing the revocation all the way from the beginning. So that was proof number 4. And now we're going to see that there's actually going to be proof number 5. And proof number 5 is going to be the exact opposite. Not that it's a revocation that's retroactive, but it's only from now. Because Tashma Tanya Beheja, we have a brisa that says it explicitly. So a woman hears decides to become a Nazir, and this other woman also hears her, and she says, and I, so she also becomes a Nazir, a Nazirah. So uva bala shall rishona behefirla, and the husband of the first woman revokes the vow. Well, now what happens? He muteris v'chaverta asura. She is now free from being a Nazir, whereas the friend is considered bound by her saying va'ani, that so shma mina bal megas gayas. It's very clear from that we only say that the revocation is from this point on, because if the revocation is retroactive, well, then when the woman said va'ani, she didn't say anything. She wasn't saying anything at all. So let's take a look, and Tosos asked the obvious question, which is, I don't understand, because answer number 4 came and told us that it was retroactive, and now you're telling us that it's megas gayas, that it's actually cutting things off from this point on. So which is it? The katsat kasha dila'el pashat midimivia chatas below ola. And a few moments ago, we said that because she brings a chatas and not an ola, to me akar ka'akar, that it's as if the vow has been eliminated from the beginning. Va'ata mahadar lemivsha tebal megas gayas. And now you're saying that it's not a retroactive, it's only from this point forward. So ein zeh shitas hashas. That's not the way the Gemara works. The Gemara doesn't give one answer in one direction and another answer in another direction and not address it. So b'yesh lomar. So we are going to. So Tosos gives the following answer, and I should have said which Tosos. This is the third Tosos on the daf. We're now towards the end of the first of the widest lines of Tosos. B'yesh lomar dahi ukimna le Rebbe Lazar HaKapar. That the first answer was according to Rebbe Lazar HaKapar, v'hach rabbanan, and now we're giving the answer according to the rabbis, according to the unnamed rabbis who are the majority. Umaisi lezed deplukta tanaihi, and that what we're really doing is we're showing that this is a machlokas tanaim, that we have Rebbe Lazar HaKapar on the one hand who says that it's all retroactive, whereas the rabbis would say no, it's not retroactive. Okay, so. And now the brisa continues. The brisa that we were just quoting continues, and it says that actually there's another opinion in this brisa. Rabbi Shimon Omer, im amra la hareini kamosech shtehen mutaros. If the woman didn't just say the ani, but rather said, I am totally like you, then when the first one is released, so then the second one is released. Now, Tosos offers 2 interpretations of this. Tosos and one interpretation is the way I just gave it, that where basically Rabbi Shimon is disagreeing with, one is that Rabbi Shimon is adding an additional factor, that if in fact the person weren't just to say the ani, but instead were to say that I am totally like you, I want to be completely connected to you. So then if the first woman gets released, so the second woman would get released as well. The other way of understanding it is to say, and in this understanding, there is no machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is just clarifying that it's possible to use additional words to say that you're completely tied together. But a second way of understanding this is to say, no, Rabbi Shimon is actually disagreeing. And he is saying when somebody says v'ani, when somebody says and I, well, then they're not only saying v'ani they're not only saying that I want to be like you from this point, but I want to be like you forever. And so as a result, the Rabbi Shimon is disagreeing with the Tanakama and saying that in all situations, you want to be tied together. And so if the first one is reversed, so then the second one would be reversed as well. So those are two different ways to understand it. We won't go through it directly in the Tosfos, but one is Rabbeinu Peretz that says that they're really arguing, and even in the case of V'ani, and this other one is the Ri, who says that no, it's not an argument at all. Rabbi Shimon is just clarifying and saying that that if you add additional words, well, then everybody would agree that that would be sufficient. So okay, so now we've got this, and now we're going to have a question on this on as to whether the argument that we've just outlined can be could be two sides of answering a question that Rami Bar Chama raised. So Mar Zutra Brei de Mari Amar Hai Hainu de Rami Bar Chama. So Mar Zutra, the son of Ramari, says that this question, this discussion that we just had the two different sides on, that potentially two sides on, that is really the issue that is dealt with by Rami Bar Chama. And what did he say? Debai Rami Bar Chama, because Rami Bar Chama asked the following: Hare alai kivsar zevach shlamim mahu. If somebody says that this piece of meat should be like that carbon shlamim, what's the halacha? Ki matpis inish. Does when the person connects them, bi'ikara matpis, is he connecting the shlamim to its initial state before the blood is sprinkled on the altar, and therefore when it cannot be eaten, and therefore the person's really saying, I want this meat to be treated like like something that is prohibited. Odilma bitsinanamaspis, or you could say that it's referring to tsinana means cold, that it's talking about after the heat of the prohibition has gone away. And so when it's the post-prohibition state, that's when we're talking about. And the large Tosfos that we have on the previous Amud, on Kafbet Amud Aleph, is going through to the discussion is to say, what is that situation? What is the case that we're talking about here? But the Ran actually offers a beautiful understanding that makes it so nicely fit together. The Ran says that what's the question here? What's the story? What's the story with the carbon shlamim that the person is trying to analogize the piece of meat to? So the Ran says we're talking about a shlamim offering that is before one has sprinkled the blood. So again, one slaughters the offering and then sprinkles the blood, and then they will be able to eat the parts that are allowed to be eaten of the animal of the carbon shlamim, because the shlamim offering is meant to allow lots of people to have food, so that because it's in some ways an effort as connecting and thanking Hashem for the good things that we have. So the point is that when the person connects their piece of meat that currently is sitting in front of them to the shlamim, it is before the shlamim has been sprinkled, the blood of the shlamim has been sprinkled. And so as a result, at the moment, the shlamim is prohibited. And the question that Rami Bar Chama is asking is, do we say that the person's intention is to have that connection between this piece of meat and that shlamim continue over time? And so as a result, when one sprinkles the blood of that shlomim, and now that shlomim becomes permitted, do we say that the piece of meat that's sitting in front of the person also now becomes permitted as well? Has the person, in tying the two things together, has the person tied them so that they continue in their path together? So when the shlomim goes from usher to mutter, so too the piece in front of the person, a piece of meat in front of the person, goes from usher to mutter. And that, of course, so nicely fits with the question that we were just asking, because here we have a woman who has tied herself to the Nazirut of somebody else. And do we say that that tying of the Nazirut continues over time? And so as a result, when the husband now is mefer the Nazirut and revokes it for the first woman, well, that should mean that it would be revoked for the second woman as well. Or do we say no? Do we say that it doesn't? And that's the question that Rami Bar Chama was asking, and that was a question that we were just analyzing. And so that's the position that Mar Zutra says, that it looks like these should be tied together. And we're going to offer two responses to that. Response number one is to say, actually, the cases are not comparable. So midami, are these cases really comparable? No, of course not. Hasam, Kaven de Amar Hare Alai Kivsar Zevach Shlamim, Afal Gatil Achar Shenizrak Damo Matzi Achal Bachutz Mikdash Kaddish. So even though the person, when it comes to the Shlamim, even after the blood is sprinkled, the meat remains holy. And so as a result, there is something to the connection, meaning the connection between this piece of meat that's in front of me and the shlomim that I just tied it to. That connection has meaning because there's still some kind of limitation on that shlomim meat, even after they're sprinkling. But when it comes to the woman, abal hacha, in the case of the two women, if you're saying that the connection even continues later, there's nothing there. There's nothing there to connect. The v'ani has no meaning because there's nothing left. And so as a result, what does it mean for there to be a v'ani? So maybe we could say that there's no connection between the two cases. But there are those who say a different answer. Yes, oddly enough, notwithstanding the point that we just made, others say, no, these cases are identical. They are really tied to one another. And so as a result, just with the Nazirut, as it becomes permitted, so too we have the Shlomim, it also becomes permitted. And so as a result, yes, really on some level, there would be no meaning to my statement, but despite that, we're going to say that they should be tied together. So those are the two different viewpoints in connection with this question. So now that we've dealt with that, we're going to deal with something very, very similar. And again, it's almost like the Gemara is trying to come at it from every different angle, this question of what the meaning of the ani is. And here we're going to say, what happens if a person says the following? Amrullah, so the first person, the wife becomes a Nazir, a Nazirah, and now woman number two says, Amrullah harein Nazira be'ikvayich mahu. I'm going to be a Nazirah in your footsteps. So what's the story? Do we say hareini be'ikvayich b'chula milsa, that she means every way, that if somehow the first woman gets a release, so Visharya, and so then she should be released as well. Odilma kamikame lefer la bala. I'm referring to following in her footsteps before the husband releases her. And so Vasira, and as a result, even if the husband were to release the vow by wife number one, the second woman would still be subject to the Nizirut. So Tashma, we're going to try to answer it. Okay, so let's see. And we're not going to be successful in doing so. So in the end, we're going to have left ourselves with this question of, does the second woman end up reneging, coming loose from the vow. So Tashma Ha'isha Shenadra Benazir V'Shama Bala V'Amar V'Ani. If a woman, in our Mishnah, we said a woman made a vow of Nazirut, and the husband heard her and said, and I, meaning that I'm going to be a Nazir also, he can no longer revoke her vow. Now, clearly the Gemara understands of the husband's ve'ani as essentially saying, I am hereby in your footsteps. So if one were to say that, if you're going to say that when he says, I am in your footsteps, be karam kamatis, that he's only referring to her original state, meaning her Nazirut. So then lefer la l'dida v'lokim didei. Why not allow the husband to annul the vow of the wife, and the husband will be subject to the Nazirut, and the wife won't be subject to the Nazirut, because the husband's intention is focused on the moment that she's a Nazir and not on always connecting the two. So doesn't this show that the husband's intention is to continue along with the wife? And the problem is that if he revokes her vow, he's effectively revoking his vow, and a person's not able to revoke his own vow. And that's why he can't revoke her vow. So it must be. So ha isha de amra hareini b'ikvayach hinami muteris. So too, when the woman says, I want to follow in your footsteps, if the first woman becomes permitted, so the second woman will also be permitted. And the Gemara answers, lo. No, that is not, in fact, a proper understanding, because we thought, according to the Hava Amina, that the reason that the husband can't revoke the vow of his wife is because that would effectively be an indirect revoking of his own vow, and a person's not allowed to revoke his own vow. That is not the reason that he cannot revoke her vow. La'olam bi karamaspis. Really, he's connected to her from only the beginning moment, or at least you could say that that's the case. And therefore, if somehow her vow were revoked, he would still be a Nazir. The problem is, the reason that he can't revoke her vow, the point is that in this case, because he said to her, and I, so then, it's as if he said to her, I am affirming your vow. That because he's using her vow, it's as if he's saying, I'm affirming your vow. So the Mitchell ahakamaso matzi mefer. But if in fact he were to ask a rabbi to annul his initial confirmation, he would be able to revoke her vow. Lo. And it's only because he has not annulled his confirmation, that's why he cannot revoke her vow. So that's case number 2. Now, one more case. What if we have the following? So, or we're going to actually pose an apparent contradiction between our Mishnah and a Brisa. So what did our Mishnah say? Hareini Nazir va'at va'amra amein. If the husband says to his wife, I'm a Nazir and you, and she says amein, and she says, yeah, I'm going to be. Amein is viewed as the answer, yes, in rabbinic literature. So mever et shalah v'shalo kayam. He has the ability to annul her vow, but while his remains in existence, because his vow was first and is not dependent on her vow. And so as a result, he has the ability to revoke her vow. Uraminu, but 1 second, there's a brisa that seems to suggest the opposite. Hareini nazir va'at va'amra amein. So same beginning. He says to her, I'm a nazir and you, and she says amein. Shneim asurin. They are both prohibited. V'im lav. But if she did not respond amein, shneim mutarin. It seems that his vow is dependent on her vow. And so in that situation, it does not say anything about allowing him to annul her vow. So doesn't that imply that he cannot annul her vow because they're connected? And as a result, if he were to annul her vow, he would effectively be annulling his vow. So that's the problem. The problem is that in our Mishnah, he can annul her vow. And in this Brisa, it seems like he cannot annul her vow. So Amar of Yehuda, and in our Mishnah, they're not tied together. And in the Brisa, they are tied together. So Amar of Yehuda, so two answers. Answer number one, Tani Mefer et Shalav V'Shalo Kayam. Really, that Brisa doesn't address the question in our Mishnah. And we can say that that Brisa is really would allow it. And in fact, if the husband were to annul her vow, his vow would remain intact. So according to answer number one, there's no difference between our Mishnah and the Brisa. Abaye says, no, you could even say that the Mishnah and the Brisa mean exactly what they say, namely that the Mishnah allows the annulling and the Brisa does not. And why is that? You could say as we learned it. Brisa could go into Amrla Hareini Nazir Ba'at. In the first case, in the Brisa case, the husband is saying to his wife, I'm a Nazir along with you. And meaning that we're both in a declaration. I'm going to be a Nazir with you. In that situation, it's clear they're tying the two together. And so as a result, if the woman says Amen, so then hold on, please. And then we're going to say Amen. And so if she says Amen, and so their two are tied together, and the husband does not have the ability to undo the wife's vow any longer, because if he undoes her vow, he'll undo his vow as well. Umas nisin kagon to Amarla Hareini Nazir v'at mai. And in our Mishnah, the at is not a statement. It's not I'm tying us together, but rather I am definitely going to be a Nazir. And what about you? Are you going to be a Nazir? So as a result, in that situation where he's a Nazir and the question is about the wife, well, Mishum Hachi Mefer et Shalah V'Shalo Kayam. In that situation, he can revoke her vow, whereas he does not, whereas his vow will remain intact. And so that brings us to the next Mishnah. And tomorrow, God willing, we'll be able to discuss one of my favorite topics in Talmud, which is when our actions and intentions don't match. And we're going to, I know, it's nice. So we're going to see, is that in particular with Lot and his daughters, how do we evaluate sins with good motivations and mitzvot with bad intentions? And so look forward to learning together tomorrow. Please stay tuned. Have a great day.